Bismillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Rabbi yassir wa la tu'assir wa tammim bil khair. In lesson number 4, we will start our journey of the verbs. The past tense verb al-fi'l al-madi. First, in book number 1 and also almost the first 3 lessons of book number 2, we discussed about jumla ismiya. And we have seen that nominal sentence consists of 2 parts, subject, mubtadaun, and predicate, khabarun. Now we will start the verbal sentence. And verbal sentence, al-jumlatul fi'liya, it also consists of 2 parts, verb, that is action, fi'lun, and then there is the doer, that is called subject, fa'ilun. So a verbal sentence should consist of minimum 2 parts, which are fi'l, that is the verb, and fa'il, the doer of the action. Base form of all Arabic verbs is in the past tense, yani al-fi'l al-madi or madin. So whenever you talk about the verb in Arabic language, so you will always start with the past tense. For example, nasara, yansuru, daraba, yadribu, sami'a, yasma'u. So it always starts with the past tense. And also the base form of the verb always corresponds to the third person, and it always starts with the third person. For example, nasara, he helped. So it will be singular masculine pronoun, yani it starts with he or huwa. Each verb form has an inbuilt or existing doer inside it. This is, I would say, the most important information about the verb that we need to know, that every verb in Arabic language has a doer, that is an inbuilt doer or existing doer inside it. So every verb has a doer inside it. The doer of the action, yani fa'ilun, is hidden, yani mustatirun, within the base form of the verb fi'lun. For example, when we say kharaja, in English we say he left. And in Arabic, it is only one word, which is kharaja. So now in kharaja, we will say that the doer is hidden, that is inside it, and that will be huwa. So the basic sentence will be huwa kharaja, but we know that it's a verbal sentence. So when we use huwa before it, it becomes a nominal sentence. But we have to focus on the verbal sentence. So when we say kharaja, that means he left. And if you want to say kharaja Bilalun, then it will be translated as Bilal left. So here in this lesson, or we will focus on the doer that is inbuilt. And then inshallah, in the next lesson, we will see that the doer will also come outside. The doer will be apparent. So we will see that the doer of the action is inbuilt, yani inside the verb. And also we will see that the doer of the action is apparent, yani it is visible. Anatomy of the past tense. Arabic verbs are generally composed of 3 letters. That's very, very important. Most of the verbs, we can say like 95% of the verbs of Arabic language, they consist of 3 letters. We call them radicals or we call them root letters. And the verbs that consist of 3 letters, we call them fi'lun thalathiyun. Fi'lun thalathiyun, the verbs that have 3 root letters, or we can say the verbs that have 3 radicals. The verb fa'ala, he did, has been adopted by the scholars of Arabic grammar as the patron, waznun, for fi'lun thalathiyun. So fa'ala is the verb. The whole Arabic structure is based on this verb, fa'ala. And whenever we talk about the waznun, the patron, please remember that it's not necessary that the patron should have a meaning. Sometimes the patron should have, sometimes it can have a meaning, but most of the times it's meaningless. It's basically, we want to say that this is on this patron. That means we have to follow that patron and nothing else. When we say fa'ala, please remember that the past tense is, the ending of the past tense is mabniyun al fath. And the past tense will always end with fatha. And when we talk about the verbs that have 3 root letters, the verb also, it starts with fatha. So it always starts with fatha and it always ends with fatha. However, ainul kalima, or the second radical, it can have dhamma and also it can have kasra. So there are 3 possibilities. that the second root letter can have fatha, it can have dhamma, and it can have kasra. So in the past tense, the second root letter will always change, but the first one and the second one will not change. They will be mabniyun ala al-fath. And to know more about it, as we can see over here, that most of the verbs have three root letters, but there is a possibility that there are some exceptions where the verbs can have four root letters, but that is very, very rare. There are examples from the Quran, but there are very few of them. So what is our pattern? That is fa, ain, lam, fa'ala. And now on this pattern, we will put different letters, and from those letters, we will make verbs. For example, kharaja. So we will say kha is fa kalima. That means the first radical. So fa will be the first kalima, and that will be kha. Similarly, ain, the second kalima is ra, and lam is the third kalima, which is ja. So fa is called, the first one is called fa al kalima, the second is called ain al kalima, and the third is called la al kalima. Or we can say first radical, second radical, and third radical. So it will be kharaja. So on the pattern of fa'ala, we have kharaja, and inshallah, we will learn many verbs on the same pattern. So for example, dhahaba, the root letters will be the, ha, ba. Fa kalima, ain kalima, lam kalima. So fa kalima is the, ain kalima is ha, and lam kalima is ba. Dhahaba, he went. So when we say dhahaba, that means the doer is inbuilt. In English, we will write it with he went, but in Arabic, it will be only dhahaba. So that means the doer is inbuilt, yani mustatir. Jalasa, we have ja, la, sa, he sat. So here, ain al kalima, we can see that ain al kalima, here it has fatha, and here it has fatha. Similarly, nasara, nasara, he helped. So again, the doer is inbuilt. And then we have samia. Now we can see here that ain al kalima has kasra over here. So the second root letter or the radical can always change. So we have samia. And then we have the last one, karuma, he became noble. So here we can see that ain al kalima has dhamma on it. So three possibilities. It can have fatha, the second root letter or the second radical, or it can have kasra, or it can have dhamma. However, the first and the last radicals, they are mabniyun ala al-fath. Conjugation of dhahaba, isnadu, dhahaba. In Arabic, we say isnad, and in English, we will say conjugation. Now, we have completed this conjugation in book number 1, alhamdulillah. And I'm sure you have memorized this conjugation as well. So as we mentioned, or as we discussed today, that the verb in Arabic language always starts with the past tense, and it starts with the third person masculine. So we have third person, al-ghaib, and the third person masculine is dhahaba. And this is also very, very important. 1 and 4, these are very, very important forms. Inshallah, we will learn more about it when we start the next lesson. So dhahaba, he went. Dhahaba, so here in dhahaba, the doer is inbuilt. Dhahaba, they both went. So here also the doer is inbuilt. And the grammarians, they say that this basically alif represents the dual. And here in dhahaba, the doer is hidden inside, that is mustatir. Then dhahabu, they all went. And here the grammarians, they say wow is basically the doer of the action. So here the doer is inbuilt. Here alif is the doer of the action. And here wow is the doer of the action. Then we have for the feminine, it is dhahabat. From number 4 is very, very important. Why? Because the verbal sentence, if the doer is apparent, if the doer is zahir, then the verbal sentence will either start with from number 1 or it will start with from number 4. Verbal sentence cannot start with any other form if the doer is apparent, if the doer is outside. For example, we say dhahaba bilalun. So when you say dhahaba bilalun, Bilal went. So now it will only start with dhahaba. Even if we have Bilalun wa Muhammadun wa Hamidun, even if we have 2, 3, 4 persons, but it will always, for masculine, the verbal sentence will always start with ذهب. And if the verbal sentence, the doer is a parent, so when we say Fatima, so if it is Fatima too, then it will be ذهبت Fatima too. So the verbal sentence for the feminine, it will always start with ذهبت, yani the fourth form of the verb. Now, even if we have Fatima and Aisha and Zainab, and even if there are like 5, 6, or 10 persons, or even 100 persons, and they are feminine, the verbal sentence will always start with ذهبت for the feminine. However, the condition is the doer should be apparent. It should be outside. For example, if we say ذهب إلى المسجد, now when we say ذهب إلى المسجد, that means the doer is inbuilt. Yani he went to masjid. And similarly, we say ذهبت إلى المدرسة, she went to the school. So the doer is inbuilt. But when we say ذهب بلال or ذهبت Fatima, then in this case, we have to use form number 1 or we have to use form number 4. Here, the doer is also inbuilt. It is ta is the sign of the feminine, and the doer is inbuilt. ذهبتا, they both went, and here alif is the doer, and ذهبنا, here noon is the doer. Now you might be seeing something over here. It says track 1 and track 2. So to understand the anatomy of the verbs, the conjugation, you can say it's like the 2 tracks of the train. You know, train has 2 tracks. So track number 1 is from number 5 up to 1, from number 1 up to from number 5. In form number 6, the track will change. What does that mean? For example, here, the second letter has fatha, 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 also fatha, and dhahabata, and also it should have fatha over here. But when we move on to the 6th form, then you can see the 3rd letter becomes sakin. It becomes dhahabna. And here, when you change the track, when you go to the 2nd track, then it will continue all the way up to form number 14 with the 3rd letter being sakin. So it will be dhahabna. And then you say dhahabta, dhahabtuma, dhahabtum, dhahabti, dhahabtuma, dhahabtunna, dhahabtu, and dhahabna. So here, if you remember this form, or if you can memorize this conjugation, as I told you that even if there are like roughly there are around 1,000 verbs in the Quran, and if you memorize the conjugation of only dhahaba, that means you can memorize, you have already memorized the conjugation of 1,000 verbs of the Quran for the past tense. So imagine, alhamdulillah, how easy it is. And this book, this course is basically, it's very interactive. It does not consist of these conjugations. However, I would say that this course will be a mix of conjugations, memorization, and then the implementation will be through the books. So I would recommend that you do both. You memorize the conjugation and then you implement it during the lessons. So inshallah, that will make it easier for us. So for the second person is called al-mukhatab. The second person masculine will be dhahabta, you went, dhahabtuma, you both went, and dhahabtum, you all went. And for the feminine, it will be dhahabti and dhahabtuma and dhahabtunna. Here the doer is ta, and here it is tuma, and here the doer is tum, and here the doer is ti, and here is tuma, and here the doer is tunna, or in fact noon. So why we say the doer? Because it's inbuilt. And then we have for the third person, it's the same for the masculine and for the feminine, it's the same. So it will be dhahabtu, and the doer is tu, and dhahabna, the doer is na, and it is also the same for feminine and masculine. So if you are able to memorize this conjugation, if you're able to write the conjugation of different verbs on the same pattern, for example, I give you jalasa, raja'a, and I give you some other verbs. And if you keep this in front of you and try to write the conjugation on the same pattern, inshallah, you will see that your learning of Arabic will become easier, and also the verbs. Please remember that Arabic is very, very rich in verbs. There is a huge variety of verbs. If you are able to master the verbs from the beginning, the rest of the journey will be very easy. But if you get stuck or you don't pay attention to this, then throughout the course, you might find it difficult to understand the verbs, because the verbs are really, really very rich and very complicated sometimes as well. So the same thing over here, we will just go through this quickly. So we say dhahaba, that means he went, and raja'a, he returned. But when you have the doer, and as I mentioned earlier, if the doer is apparent, if the doer is visible, if the doer is outside, in dhahaba, the doer is inbuilt. In raja'a, the doer is inbuilt. But when you say dhahaba Bilalun, and then it means Bilal went and not Bilal, he went. Now that he is dropped, so it will be Bilal went. In dhahaba, it means Bilal went. But when you say dhahaba Bilalun, then it means Bilal went. Like in English, we can't say Bilal, he went. Similarly, in Arabic, we won't say Bilal, he went. The translation will be Bilal went. And for the feminine, we use dhahabat. And if you want to say Amina went, we will say dhahabat Amina too. She went. So in dhahaba, he went, and dhahabat, she went. The subject is said to be damirun mustatirun, yani hidden pronoun. But the hidden pronoun is always there. But if we have the doer outside it, then it will become the doer, and then it is not hidden anymore, as we can see over here. Al-isnadu, the conjugation, as I have shown you the conjugation. So in this lesson, we will learn about dhahaba, he went, and dhahabat, she went. And note that the ta is the sign of its being feminine. It's not a pronoun. So this ta is the sign of feminine. In dhahabu, they went. The doer is waw, as I mentioned earlier. In dhahabna, the doer is na, as we can see over here. In dhahabta, the doer is ta, and in dhahabtu, the doer is tu. So now look at the example as I mentioned earlier. Aina Bilalun wa Hamidun wa Khalidun. This is a question, and you say dhahabu ila suqi. They went to the market. If the answer is like this, dhahabu ila suqi, it refers to Bilal, Hamid, and Khalid. But if you want to start a sentence, here the doer is inside. Here the doer is basically hum dhahabu, and they went. So here the doer is inside. Okay, so after that, you can see ila suqi, we have jar majroor, we don't have the real doer. So that's why we will use it. We will say dhahabu ila suqi. But if we have the doer outside, then we cannot use dhahabu. We will see inshallah in the next lesson, then we have to use dhahaba. Aina Aminatu wa Fatimatu wa Zainabu dhahabna ila al-madrasati. They went to the school. As I mentioned, that if you memorize the conjugation, then after memorizing the conjugation, the best way is to implement what we have learned through these books. So that's why this course is very interactive and very useful. So dhahabna, they went ila al-madrasati. Again, after dhahabna, we have jar majroor. We don't have the real doer. So that's why we will consider that the doer is inside, and the inside doer will be hunna dhahabna ila al-madrasati. They went to the school. To render a verb in the Madi negative, the particle ma is used. Okay, now you want to make negative. The past tense, you want to make it negative. So here we have ma. This is the second kind, or the second type of ma. Do you remember the first type of ma that we have learned already in book number 1? Does anyone remember? In book number 1, we have learned ma al-istifhamiyah. Excellent, ma al-istifhamiyah. That is the ma of asking questions. This is called ma an-nafiyah. Ma an-nafiyah, that is ma of negation. So this is the second type of ma that we are learning now. This is called ma of negation, ma an-nafiyah. So you need to memorize the name as well, and how to use it in the past tense. For example, you say dhahabtu ila suqi, I went to the market. And if you simply want to say I didn't go to the market, you only use ma with that, and that's it. Ma dhahabtu ila suqi, I didn't go to the market. Now here in English, we had to make 2 changes. Went, we had to change it into go, and we had to add didn't. But in Arabic, we don't have to go through all that. We only have to use ma, and then it becomes negative. So you say ma dhahabtu ila suqi, I didn't go to the market. Similarly, ma kharaj al-imamu min al-masjidi, the imam did not go out of the mosque. And similarly, dakhala Bilalun walakinnahu ma jalasa. Bilal entered, but he did not sit. So as we can see that whenever you simply use ma with the past tense, then it becomes negative. So we can see that it's very simple to negate the past tense. We only have to add ma, and then it becomes negative. Now, the difference between na'am and bala, we have learned that bala is used to a question that is a negative question, and na'am is used to a question that is a regular question. However, the word bala is used in response to negative question. If a Muslim is asked, however, if a Muslim is asked, alasta bi muslimin, aren't you a Muslim? The answer will be bala ana muslimun. Yes, I'm a Muslim. So here we are using bala and it gives the meaning of yes, and the question is negative. But if the same question is asked to a non-Muslim, then how will he reply? He will reply in na'am. Why? But if a non-Muslim is asked the same question, he replies na'am, lastu bi muslimin. Why he says na'am, lastu bi muslimin? Because in response to a negative question, we have to use na'am. Means no, sorry, in response to a negative question, na'am means no, and bala means yes. Na'am means no. So as we can see over here, he says na'am, lastu bi muslimin. So that's a small difference that we need to understand. However, the only thing that we need to focus on, if the question is negative, then we have to answer it using bala. Li'anna, that means because. And this is one of the sisters of inna. We have learned about inna from lesson number 1. We learned about inna, and la'alla we have learned in lesson number 1. Then lakinna and ka'anna we have learned in lesson number 2 and 3. And today we are going to learn li'anna, that means because. So this is the 4th sister of inna, and then inshallah we will be left with 2 more sisters of inna, that will be anna and bi anna, and inshallah we will learn them in the following lessons. So as of now, you should know how to use inna, la'alla, lakinna, ka'anna, and inshallah after completing today's lesson, ma is only used in the past tense. There is a question. When you want to negate the past tense, we only use ma. However, there is a possibility that it can be used with the present tense, but then there is a condition, and inshallah we will learn about this in the I think in book number 2. Yes. Okay, so li'anna is the sister of inna, so that means it will have the same function as inna. Ma kharajtu min al-bayti li'anna al-jawwa baridun. So whenever we have li'anna, that means ismu li'anna will be mansub and khabaru li'anna will be marfu. The same thing that we learned about inna. So I didn't go out of the house because the weather is cold. And ذهب إبراهيم إلى المستشفى لأنه مريض. And whenever we have the attached pronoun, that means the attached pronoun will be the ism of لأن, and مريض will be خبر لأن. Ibrahim went to the hospital because he is sick. Note that لأن is made up of li, which is harf jar li, that means for, and anna, which is sister of inna. And so the noun that follows it will be mansub, as we have seen over here. So li'anna means because. Li'anna means because. That's it. Alhamdulillah. So we have completed the main parts of the lesson. And when we, inshallah, start the next lesson, we will implement these parts that we have learned. And inshallah, we will learn more about the verb and also the use of li'anna. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.